My name is Nathan Miller. I'm 29, and until last year, I thought I had a pretty solid grasp on what family was supposed to mean. Not the picture perfect postcard version, just the real kind. The one that holds you up when life gets heavy, even if you're the one carrying more weight than anyone else realizes. I always figured if I kept my head down, stayed reliable, and gave more than I took, it would all even out somehow. I was never the loud one, never the showboat. If anything, I was the default background character in my own story. The quiet middle kid who remembered birthdays, showed up early to help set the table at Thanksgiving, and paid for things behind the scenes because no one else could or would. In most families, that might earn you a little respect. In mine, it just meant I was the easiest to overlook. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, wedged between my older brother Zachary, the hometown hero, with the football trophies and a million-watt grin, and my younger sister Lila, the baby everyone doted on like a porcelain doll. Zach was the golden boy varsity quarterback prom king and the kind of guy who could crash a car and still get a pat on the back from dad. Lila was the delicate one straight A's ballet recitals, the apple of mom's eye from the day she was born. Me. Got decent grades, mostly B pluses. I wasn't exactly anyone's pride and joy, but I wasn't causing trouble either. That's the thing though, being invisible doesn't protect you from pressure. I constantly heard how I wasn't reaching my potential, how I needed to push harder, aim higher, be more. So I did what I thought was right. I worked. Hard. I won a scholarship, moved out at 18, and put myself through college on the East Coast. After that, I founded a tiny tech startup in Boston. It was just me, two laptops, and a dream no one believed in except me. The first 3 years were a grind cheap takeout, 17-hour days, and rejection after rejection from investors who couldn't see past the cheap suit I wore to every pitch meeting. Still, I didn't give up. I coded through weekends, took side gigs fixing computers just to make rent, and kept pouring everything I had into building something real. And then, it worked. By some miracle, or maybe just stubbornness, the company finally took off. One client turned into 5, then 20. I hired my first team, rented an actual office. We landed a contract with a regional bank, and suddenly I wasn't scraping by anymore. I was stable, maybe even successful. But here's what nobody tells you the moment success arrives. So does a knock on the door from people who were perfectly fine ignoring you when all you had to offer was your time and loyalty. And for me, that knock came with my family's familiar voices on the other side. But this time, they weren't checking in. They were asking for things. It started innocently enough, just a short phone call from Dad on a chilly Wednesday evening. I had just wrapped up a late meeting with a fintech client when his name lit up my phone. We hadn't spoken in weeks, maybe months. I picked up immediately, half expecting a casual check-in. Instead, he jumped right in. "Hey Nathan, Zach's having a tough time covering the last few payments on his truck. Nothing major. Just until he gets that promotion next quarter. Think you could spot him for a bit?" I hesitated for a second. Not because I didn't want to help, but because it had been years since Zach had even replied to one of my texts. Still, I said yes. Of course I did. I wired the amount that night. Then came the next ask. A month later, Mom called breathless and frantic. "Honey, I hate to bother you, but Lila's college didn't give her enough financial aid this term. You know how expensive private schools are. Would you be able to cover the difference?" I didn't ask how a performing arts major at a boutique university in upstate New York had managed to max out her aid. I just nodded silently and asked for the amount. Then came the roof repairs, followed by a new furnace that winter, and then a complete kitchen remodel that Mom had always dreamed of. Within 6 months, I was financing 3 separate households: my parents' suburban home in Akron, Zach's condo in Columbus, and Lila's tuition plus living expenses in Rochester. I was sending money, like clockwork tuition deadlines, overdue credit cards, gas bills, even the occasional, "Can you Venmo me $60 for groceries from Mom?" Always with a sweet emoji at the end, as if that made it feel like anything less than an invoice. At first, I told myself I was lucky I could help, that this was what success was for, to lift others. I convinced myself I was building something, a legacy maybe, something that would bring us closer. I imagined future holidays where we'd all sit around laughing in a house that I helped sustain, maybe even earned their pride. But the problem wasn't the giving, it was how quickly it became expected. No thanks, no acknowledgement, just an open hand every month like I was fulfilling an obligation. And slowly a voice inside me, the one I had buried under years of quiet obedience, started to whisper that maybe this wasn't love. Maybe this was just usage. It was the first time in my life that I had a home big enough to host Thanksgiving dinner. A real place with a wraparound porch, vaulted ceilings, and a backyard that didn't just end in a chain link fence. I bought the house in Burlington, Vermont, mostly because I'd fallen in love with the quiet there, but also because it felt like something worth celebrating after years of scraping by. So I invited everyone. My parents, Zach, Lila, even extended family. I wanted to show them that I had made it. Not in a flashy look at me now kind of way, but in a quieter, more hopeful sense. Like maybe this could be the moment they'd see me not just as the one who solved their emergencies, but as someone who mattered. I had the whole event catered. A local chef prepared a 5-course meal. I hired a cleaning service to get the house spotless, bought decorations, even set up a fire pit in the backyard with warm cider and folding chairs. It was the kind of gathering I'd always dreamed about hosting. They all showed up hungry and smiling, but not one of them lifted a finger. No one offered to help carry in the food. No one offered to set the table or pour drinks. Lila barely looked up from her phone the entire evening, too busy whispering with her new boyfriend, a guy she didn't even bother introducing to anyone. Zach dominated the living room, like always laughing loud, cracking jokes that mostly involved mocking people he knew in high school. Halfway through the meal, Zach stood up to make a toast. "We're so lucky, aren't we?" he said, raising his wine glass. "To family, because no matter what, family always comes through." Everyone nodded, clinked glasses. Not a single person mentioned the fact that I had footed the entire bill, that the wine they were sipping was $40 a bottle, the kind of vintage I used to dream about back when I couldn't afford a bottle of gas station soda. My dad spent most of the evening launching into his usual monologues about how kids these days have it easy, and how back in his day no one needed handouts. The irony of those words coming from a man whose mortgage I was quietly covering didn't even seem to register. I smiled through all of it. I cracked jokes, played host, made sure everyone's plate stayed full. But inside, something was splintering. I wasn't angry, not yet. What I felt was heavier, more final, like I was watching something erode that had taken a lifetime to build. That night, I stood by the kitchen sink, scraping plates while everyone laughed in the living room. It hit me this was never going to change. No matter how much I gave, it would never be seen. It would never be enough. It happened on a Tuesday, just one of those gray, forgettable evenings in early February. I had come home late after a strategy meeting with one of our banking partners. My mind was still spinning with numbers and charts when I saw the voicemail notification. It was from my dad. I figured maybe he was calling to say thanks for the dinner. Maybe Mom had finally convinced him to be decent for once. I poured a glass of water, kicked off my shoes, and hit play. His voice came through clipped gravelly. That specific sharpness that only fathers can manage when they're pretending they're not furious, but already 2 steps past it. "All you do is take," he said. "You've never given this family anything that matters. If you had an ounce of pride, you'd stop acting like you're owed something and just walk away." I froze. The glass in my hand didn't fall, but I swear it might as well have. I stood completely still, my pulse louder than his words. Surely I misheard him. I replayed it. "All you do is take." I didn't yell, didn't scream, didn't even call him back. I just stared at the floor for a long moment. The city lights outside flickered against the glass windows, but the warmth I used to feel looking out over them, it was gone. Something inside me gave way. Not loudly, not all at once. It was more like a hinge quietly snapping after years of pressure. A slow, undeniable break. I packed a bag that night. No dramatic speech, no text goodbye. I logged into my bank account and had my assistant pause all outgoing transfers linked to my family utilities, tuition, credit card payments, car loans, everything. Then I booked a flight to Santa Fe, a place I'd never been but far enough that it felt like I was leaving orbit. I shut down my phone notifications, turned off email. The silence wasn't jarring, it was beautiful, almost addictive. 3 days passed, then a week. No one reached out. The people I'd held up for years didn't even notice I was gone. It took almost 4 weeks, 4 full weeks of complete radio silence before anyone in my family realized the flow of money had stopped. No payments, no emergency transfers, no Nathan. Lila was the first to break. Late one Friday night, my phone buzzed with a call from her. I didn't answer. Seconds later, a voicemail popped up followed by a text. "Hey, I just logged into my school portal and the tuition payment didn't go through. Did something happen with the account?" She was trying to sound casual, but I could hear the tension between the lines. That fake sugar-dipped tone you use when you're hoping the other person won't notice you're in a full-blown panic. I stared at the message for a moment. Then I typed back one sentence. Thought I never gave this family anything. No punctuation, no follow-up, just that. She didn't respond. But within the hour, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. 4 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Zach. One unknown number left a voicemail. Probably Dad using a different phone since I'd stopped picking up. His voice in that recording made my stomach turn. "Nathan, we need to talk. Whatever this little stunt is, it's not funny. Your sister's future is on the line." Not a single word of apology. Not one acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, what I was doing made sense. Just accusations. Just that same old tone I'd heard my whole life, stern, entitled, full of assumed authority. That weekend I flew to Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'd never even been west of the Mississippi before, but the moment I stepped out of the airport and felt the dry desert air hit my face, I knew I'd chosen right. The mountains in the distance looked like freedom. I rented a quiet Adobe-style Airbnb at the edge of town. It had a small patio, clay tile floors, and a view of the sunset that felt like therapy. I turned off my phone completely. Spent mornings walking into the nearby plaza for coffee, afternoons journaling under the shade of desert trees, and evenings sitting in silence. It was the first time in years I didn't feel the pull of obligation. No calls, no guilt, no voices in my ear saying, "Hey, can you just do one more thing for us?" Back home, that's when things began to crumble. Lila's school sent her a probationary withdrawal notice for non-payment. Zach's truck, still sitting unpaid, got repossessed. And Mom and Dad, their mortgage bounced. The foundation they had built, one dependent entirely on my silence, finally started to crack wide open. The messages kept coming. My family wasn't reaching out to reconnect, they were scrambling to reattach the strings. And I was done being their puppet. I forwarded every voicemail to my email and archived them. No response, no reaction, just receipts. By the second week in Santa Fe, I finally called Daniel, my attorney and longtime friend from college, who'd helped me set up my first LLC. He picked up on the first ring. "I'm ready," I said. "For what?" "To stop pretending I'm not furious." I gave him 3 instructions. First, I wanted all remaining educational payments redirected. Instead of wasting more on Lila's ungrateful private school bills, I told him to funnel those funds into a new scholarship foundation, one for first-generation college students from underserved communities. The kind of people who wouldn't text their benefactor only when the tuition check bounced. Second, I asked him to dig into the ownership deed for the lake house in Vermont, the so-called family retreat my parents used every summer. I'd been the one to cover its full purchase price 5 years ago, under the promise it would be a shared family asset. But something in my gut told me I'd never really had ownership of anything, at least not in their eyes. Turns out legally I did. The property had been registered in my name only. They had never bothered to update the deed because they didn't think it mattered. Or maybe they assumed I'd never take action. Either way, the house was mine, completely. That Sunday morning, I booked a flight back east, not to make amends, not to beg or confront, just to gather evidence. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I landed in Albany, picked up a rental, and drove straight to the house, the one I'd helped renovate, the one Dad had threatened to sell unless someone in the family paid for water damage repairs. Of course, someone had meant me. The siding was the same beige I'd paid to repaint. The porch furniture still bore the initials I'd carved in one summer, when I thought family meant permanence. I parked across the street, took a deep breath, and walked up with the spare key Mom forgot I still had. As I stepped through the front door, I heard them. "He's being dramatic," Zach's voice drifted in from the living room. "He'll come crawling back, he always does." Then Lila. "It's not even that much money to him, right?" And Dad with his signature grumble, "Nathan's always been the weakest. Hides behind a computer and thinks that makes him special." I didn't cry. I didn't storm in. I didn't even flinch. It was confirmation. They had never seen me. Not as a son, not as a person, only as a transaction. I turned and walked out, drove straight to the lake house, took detailed photographs of every room, every angle, emailed them to Daniel. By sundown, he had everything he needed to begin listing it for sale. This time I wasn't leaving quietly. The lake house sold quickly. Daniel found a buyer within 2 weeks, an older couple from Connecticut looking for a peaceful place near their grandkids. They paid in full. No negotiation, no fuss. But I wasn't done. There was still the main house, my parents' suburban stronghold, the one I had sunk tens of thousands into over the years: roof repairs, HVAC kitchen renovation, even the damn plumbing after Zach accidentally flooded the basement trying to install a home gym. I never signed a formal loan agreement, but Daniel had the wire transfers, every last one, and it was more than enough to file a lien on the house. They owed me over $80,000. So we moved to seize it. The foreclosure process was swift, clean paperwork, no contest, no viable counter-argument. Their savings were drained, their credit ruined, and their dignity, well, that would come next. On the morning of the auction, I parked across the street and waited. It was a sharp October day, the kind that makes your breath hang in the air like unfinished words. The front lawn bore a white plastic sign: "Foreclosure auction today, no trespassing." Inside, Daniel was already briefing the auction rep. I stepped in quietly just in time to hear the woman flipping through forms and announcing we begin in 15 minutes. I took a slow walk through the house. The den still had the gouge in the floor where Zach had thrown a baseball. The hallway carpet still bore the faint pink stain from the time Lila spilled nail polish and blamed me. The fridge still had my high school drawings magneted beneath grocery lists. And yet, there wasn't a single family photo that included me. It hit like a cold slap. I had been a ghost in this house. Present, providing, but invisible. I walked back to the porch just as the familiar sound of tires crunched up the gravel driveway. My parents arrived in Dad's battered Chevy. Zach stepped out first, jaw set like a soldier. Lila followed, oversized sunglasses hiding eyes that couldn't hide how red they were. And then my parents' mom looking older, defeated. Dad trying to look composed but trembling with rage. "Nathan," he said, voice low and bristling, "we need to talk." I didn't move. He marched up Zach close behind him like a bodyguard. "You're really doing this," Dad hissed, "humiliating your own family over what? A misunderstanding." I met his eyes, calm, unshaken. "It's not a misunderstanding," I replied. "It's a pattern, and today it ends." "You ungrateful," he started. I raised a hand. "Don't." Lila's voice cracked as she stepped forward. "I had to drop 2 classes because of this. I'm losing my scholarship. Why are you doing this to us?" "I paid for 3 years of your education," I said. "Every textbook, every dorm deposit. And not once did you say thank you. Instead, you told strangers online that I was unstable." I held up my phone. "I have screenshots." She looked away. Mom finally spoke. "Nathan, families don't do this to each other." "No," I said. "Families don't take like this. You didn't just borrow, you extracted, you guilted. You drained me until I stopped being your son and became your bank account." The auctioneer called out, "We begin in 5 minutes." Dad's eyes darted around. "You wouldn't even have this house if it weren't for us." I stepped closer. "Exactly, and that's why I'm taking it back." They didn't follow me as I walked away. They didn't shout. They didn't beg. They just stood there, rooted to the porch, helpless for the first time in years. And I didn't look back. The house sold within the hour. A retired couple from New Hampshire placed the winning bid. They smiled warmly as they signed the paperwork, chatting about how excited they were to be closer to their grandkids. I shook their hands, handed Daniel the keys, and never looked back. 3 weeks later, the moving truck arrived. My parents didn't even pack properly. They grabbed what they could, tossed the rest into piles in the garage. Broken appliances, old clothes boxes of dusty trophies, forgotten relics of a family built on image and imbalance. One of the movers found a worn-out spiral notebook labeled Junk Basement. It was mine. A journal from high school. Inside were scribbled goals written in messy blue ink. Get into college, start a company, buy a house, take care of my family. I stared at the last line for a long time. Funny how dreams change when you finally realize who you've been dreaming for. I donated the furniture, trashed the rest. Emma, my cousin, the only one who had stayed neutral, helped me close the estate. When it was done, she gave me a long, wordless hug. "You did the right thing," she whispered, "even if it doesn't feel like it yet." And she was right. It didn't feel like victory. There was no cinematic resolution, no slow clap, no teary reconciliation, just quiet, a deep, echoing silence that filled the spaces my family used to occupy. But that silence, it was sacred. I moved a few months later, not far, just to a small loft in Portland, Maine. It was simpler, smaller, but every inch of it was mine. No mortgage payments secretly tied to someone else's name. No Venmo requests for unexpected expenses. No passive-aggressive voicemails. The calls eventually stopped. The texts dried up. Even the bitterness began to dissolve over time. I didn't hate them, not even then. I just detached, like finally cutting a rope that had dragged me underwater for far too long. One night I sat out on my balcony sipping tea as the city lights blinked in the distance. I thought back to that Thanksgiving dinner, the one where Zach raised his glass and toasted to how family always comes through. They had smiled so wide that night, so proud, so certain, but they never saw the cracks. Because the glue holding them together had been me. And now they were learning what it meant to live without it. Months passed. I didn't hear from any of them until one rainy afternoon in early spring when an email arrived from Lila. No subject line, just one sentence in the body. "I don't expect a response. I just wanted to say I get it now, and I'm sorry." I read it twice, then again, and then I archived it. Not out of spite, not to make a point, but because I no longer needed anything from them. Not their recognition, not their guilt, not even their remorse. I had already gotten the one thing I'd been silently begging for all my life: closure. The kind that doesn't come in one big moment, but in dozens of small ones: choosing not to reply, choosing not to defend yourself, choosing peace over proximity. I started traveling again, something I hadn't done freely in years. My first trip was to Tokyo, first class, no guilt. I spent the flight watching the sun rise above the clouds somewhere over the Pacific, and for the first time in over a decade, I didn't feel like I was running from anything. In Tokyo, I wandered between temples and neon arcades, walked narrow alleys that smelled of cedar and ramen, sat on rooftops without checking my phone even once. The quiet there didn't feel lonely, it felt earned. 2 weeks into the trip, I unblocked just one person: Emma. She had sent exactly one message during the fallout. No pressure, no judgment. "When you're ready to talk, I'm here, not to fix it, just to listen." After I returned home, we met at a small cafe near her apartment in Providence. She slid her laptop across the table, frowning. "I want to show you something," she said. It was a Reddit post, a throwaway account, but I recognized the tone instantly. It was Lila. She had spun a sob story online claiming her brother had abandoned the family during a mental breakdown, leaving her at risk of expulsion. She framed herself as the victim of sudden financial cruelty, asking for donations. And people gave. Strangers who had never met me sent her money. She'd already raised nearly $6,000. Emma looked at me, her jaw tight. I thought you should know. I didn't rage post, didn't confront her. Instead, I did something quieter. I collected every payment I had ever made toward her education. Tuition receipts, wire transfers, even a screenshot of the $200 I once sent her for textbooks she never thanked me for. I uploaded it all to a private image album, no names, no accusations, just dates and proof. Then I left one anonymous comment on her post. Before you donate, ask where the other $90,000 went. Some people forget who helped them until the help stops. The post was gone within 24 hours, removed for suspicious activity. The comments turned fast, and for the first time in her life, Lila had to face consequences not backed by me. A week later, Daniel forwarded a letter to my office. It was typed formal and signed by both my parents. We are formally requesting a meeting to discuss the breakdown of our family dynamic. I laughed out loud in my office. Buried in legal jargon, the real reason emerged: they wanted part of the lake house proceeds. They cited emotional equity. Daniel rolled his eyes and said, "Want me to remind them emotional equity isn't legally enforceable?" I nodded. Instead, we sent them a scanned copy of the agreement Dad had signed 5 years ago. I acknowledge that this property is purchased and owned solely by Nathan Miller. I relinquish all future claims. His signature sat there in bold blue ink. That ended the conversation, but it didn't stop there. While I was in Tokyo, Daniel and I had quietly initiated a lien on the main house too. Years ago, I'd loaned them money under a verbal understanding, never paid back. Now we had a paper trail. Every deposit, every overdue transfer, every promise broken. We filed. They tried to stall. They threatened to go public. I told Emma, let them. I have receipts. And I did, for everything. On the morning of the second house auction, I walked through one last time. Every corner held a memory, some bitter, some sweet, all distant. I passed the kitchen where I used to scrub dishes alone on holidays, the hallway where old report cards once hung until mine stopped getting posted. I found a photo on the counter. Christmas 2 years ago, matching outfits, everyone smiling. They'd cropped me out before posting it online. I turned the photo face down. As people gathered outside, I stood on the sidewalk while my family pulled up in the same old Chevy. They looked smaller now, tired, weathered. Even Zach stayed silent. Dad approached desperate. "You're really doing this?" "Yes," I said. "For once I'm doing something for me." And with that, I turned away toward the future, toward peace, toward a life that wasn't built on guilt. That night, I didn't feel victorious. I felt free.